The 1930s. Europe simmers with unease. The scars of World War I are still fresh, and a new darkness stirs in Germany. Led by Adolf Hitler, a charismatic but ultimately delusional dictator, Germany seems unstoppable. But beneath the surface of blitzkrieg victories and fervent nationalism, a storm is brewing. Fueled by a twisted ideology of racial supremacy and expansionism, the Nazi Party whips Germany into a frenzy of nationalism. Early victories in Poland and France solidify this image. This documentary explores the crucial mistakes that led to Hitler's downfall and the eventual defeat of Nazi Germany in World War II. In 1939, the world watches in horror as Hitler unleashes a torrent of violence across Europe. Blitzkrieg tactics, lightning-fast offensives with overwhelming armored forces, pave the way for early victories. Poland falls within weeks, and France crumbles in a matter of months. Hitler seems unstoppable. But beneath the surface of these initial triumphs, a storm is brewing. While Hitler's initial conquests were swift and brutal, his strategic blunders would ultimately prove fatal. We'll delve into these mistakes, from underestimating his enemies to the logistical nightmare of a two-front war. This documentary delves into the critical errors that ultimately led to Hitler's downfall and the defeat of Nazi Germany in World War II. We'll explore the strategic blunders, the underestimation of enemies, the logistical nightmare of a two-front war, and the internal leadership failures that crippled the Nazi war machine. Hitler's first major miscalculation was underestimating the resolve of his opponents. Take Britain. Though initially pushed back at Dunkirk, the British displayed remarkable resilience. Where hundreds of thousands of troops were evacuated across the English Channel, the British refused to surrender. Prime Minister Winston Churchill's defiant speeches rallied the nation, and Britain became a thorn in Hitler's side throughout the war. Hitler's racial arrogance also led him to make a fatal mistake with the Soviet Union. He believed the Slavic people to be inferior and their vast nation ripe for the taking. This delusion fueled Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the USSR in June 1941. However, Stalin's ruthless leadership and the sheer size of the Red Army proved him terribly wrong. The brutal winter of 1941–42 crippled the German advance, marking a turning point on the Eastern Front. The desperate struggle for Stalingrad became a symbol of Soviet resilience, and the tide of the war began to turn. From the outset, fighting a war on two fronts, East and West, was a colossal strategic blunder. Hitler's decision to invade the USSR shattered the Nazi-Soviet non-aggression pact and forced Germany to fight on multiple fronts, stretching its resources to the breaking point. The vast distances involved in the Eastern Front campaign made resupply a logistical nightmare, and German troops found themselves bogged down in a brutal war of attrition, the very kind of warfare they were ill-equipped for. Hitler's unwavering belief in blitzkrieg tactics ultimately backfired. Blitzkrieg relied on overwhelming force and rapid movement, but the vastness of the Soviet Union and the determined resistance of the Red Army exposed its limitations. Additionally, Hitler's micromanagement and disregard for the advice of his generals proved disastrous. He frequently diverted resources towards secondary campaigns in North Africa and Italy, draining the Eastern Front of vital supplies and manpower. As the war progressed, Hitler became increasingly isolated and paranoid, clinging to losing strategies and refusing to accept the reality of the situation. This breakdown in leadership further crippled German war efforts. As the war dragged on, Germany's industrial limitations became evident. Hitler's leadership became increasingly erratic. He ignored the advice of his generals, micromanaged operations, and stubbornly clung to losing strategies. The combined industrial might of the US and the USSR dwarfed Germany's. The Allies were able to mass-produce tanks, planes, ships, and other essential war materials at a rate that Germany simply couldn't match. This disparity in production became a major factor later in the war, as the Allies flooded. As the war progressed, this breakdown in command further crippled German war efforts. Additionally, Germany faced a growing manpower shortage. Blitzkrieg relied on a rapid influx of fresh troops, but the prolonged conflict depleted German reserves. The Allies, on the other hand, had access to vast manpower pools, tipping the scales decisively. The inevitable consequences of these mistakes began to unfold. The Allied D-Day invasion in June 1944 opened a second front in Europe. Soviet forces relentlessly pushed westward, ultimately capturing Berlin in 1945. On May 8, Germany surrendered, marking the end of the deadliest conflict in human history. The cost of Hitler's hubris was unimaginable. Millions perished in the war, and the atrocities committed by the Nazi regime left an indelible stain on history. However, from the ashes of this conflict rose a renewed commitment to peace and a global resolve to prevent such horrors from ever happening again. The lessons learned from Hitler's downfall are as relevant today as ever. Underestimating opponents, waging war on multiple fronts, and clinging to flawed strategies, these are all mistakes with potentially devastating consequences. By understanding the factors that led to Hitler's defeat, we can work towards a future where reason and diplomacy prevail.
Leave a comment below and tell me what you think. Hit that like button if you enjoyed this video. Share this video with your friends who might be interested. Subscribe for more.